Dealers. Could there be untapped revenue on your lot? Protective Asset Protection works with dealers to unlock new revenue streams through reliable protection products across most vehicle types. Visit protectiveassetprotection.com/automotive news to learn more.
Welcome to this weekend drive edition of Daily Drive for the second week in May 2026. I'm Kellen Walker in Las Vegas. We're breaking down some of the biggest stories from the past week and looking forward to what's in store in the days ahead. Today, we'll talk about Ford's secretive Skunk Works project in California to develop a next-gen EV, the state of the pickup market as Chevy looks to capitalize on F-150 supply issues, and more. Joining me today, as always, Michael Martinez, who covers Ford and the UAW for us at Automotive News. Mike, welcome back.
Thanks, Kel.
And Larry Velaquette, who covers Toyota and Subaru and Mazda for us. Larry Legend, how have you been, sir?
I've been fine. Feeling spicy today.
Me too, which makes for a good episode. Mike,
Yes.
I am so sorry. You're going to have to be the adult today.
That's wouldn't be the first time.
Per usual, right? All right, guys, let's get started. So, Mike, you got a rare look inside Ford's California Skunk Works, where they're building what Jim Farley calls Ford's answer to the Chinese. You talked about this on Tuesday's show. Remind us what you saw out in Long Beach and how important is this project for Ford's future?
Yeah, so Ford has a new electric vehicle development center in Long Beach. It's 300,000 square feet. There are two main buildings. They outgrew some smaller digs in nearby Irvine. This one's right next to the Long Beach airport. And this is the home of the Skunk Works team, the team that is building the universal EV platform. And we're going to see the first product on that platform. It's that $30,000 midsize EV pickup. And in terms of importance, this is critical to the company's future. Jim Farley's called it their moonshot. He said it represents a step change in terms of costs and efficiency. And this is a company that they are letting operate like its own startup within Ford, a company within a company, so to speak. You have complete separation, both literally, it's pretty far from Dearborn, and figuratively in terms of who can work on that program. One of my most fascinating details I learned in reporting that story was that if any Ford veteran wanted to join the team, they had to be vetted. They had to go through an interview process. And a not insignificant amount of them didn't make the cut if they didn't fit the culture and if they didn't fit in terms of their smarts or their capability to deliver this new platform. And it's really fascinating, Kel, because if you think about it, whether or not they're successful here, it gets to that bigger picture of, can a legacy automaker, can a company with a century plus of experience change on the fly and adapt to what some of these startups and what the Chinese are doing in terms of speeding development, really drastically reducing costs? And we'll find out next year whether they succeed or not.
Now, Mike, is this like Ford's black budget project? Because the use of the term Skunk Works, are we overusing that? Because I immediately think Lockheed Martin and SR-71 Blackbirds.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I don't know that we're overusing it because that's what they've modeled it on. Kelly Johnson, who founded the Skunk Works team for Lockheed Martin, is apparently one of Doug Field's heroes, manufacturing engineering heroes. So they called it the Skunk Works team. If you know the history back in the late 30s, early 40s, what was it? Lockheed had this team that operated basically on its own. It was before Skunk Works, it was called its Advanced Development Projects team. And fast forward to today, what's Alan Clark's title for Ford? Vice President of Advanced Development Projects. So you mentioned the Blackbird, the SR-71. They developed this spy plane and a number of other fighter jets and vehicles on sort of a tighter budget, smaller team. And there's a number of parallels to what Ford wants to do. Now, this isn't the same level of stakes. We're talking about an affordable EV truck, right? Not national security. No national security implications here. But one thing Alan Clark told us was they really valued the way the Lockheed Skunk Works team were able to not only change processes in terms of manufacturing, but processes in terms of sourcing. He referenced the Blackbird. He said, that plane was mostly built out of titanium. Where did most of the titanium come from? I think it was the 60s ish when it was built. came from the Soviet Union, came from Russia, the country we were trying to build it to spy on in the heart of the Cold War. So, what did the team do in partnership with the CIA and the government? They set up these shell companies, basically consumer facing shell companies, to source titanium from the Soviet Union. And they were able to put it all together into the Blackbird. So, again, the stakes aren't quite as high or as serious, but they're really trying to mimic the lengths and the different ways the Lockheed Skunk Works went about building their products. And one last thing I would say, what struck me when I walked into the lobby of this building, there's this list of 12 cultural commandments. I mentioned this on Tuesday's show, but it's very startup-y. There are phrases like fight silos, step on toes, simplify down to the atom. Sir Isaac Newton decides, that was a fun one. It's meant to remind people that physics is really their only real limit. But again, that mimics Lockheed Skunk Works team. They had 14 principles they were working on. They were a lot less pithy. There were, I think one of them was, you must conduct a monthly finance review. Ford does that. Another one was the contractor must be able to test their pieces to final completion. And that's what Ford's trying to do here. They want to strip the bureaucracy and say, hey, we have an idea. We need to shrink this part 10%. Let's see how it fits and run all the models, not get sign off from Dearborn first, not go back to the supplier and wait a month for a new part. Let's 3D print it. Let's do it all here and speed up what might take months into a few days. So it may end up being cliche using the Skunk Works term, but they're really, really trying to mimic how Lockheed did things.
If you haven't had a chance to read Mike's story, make sure you go grab it and go through it on our website. What's really interesting to me is the rationale behind this, right? That Farley's offering, which is, this is our way to fight China. And if anything, I was impressed by what they were doing, but if anything, it's not big enough. It's what they're talking about is an affordable pickup truck. And maybe an EV platform. But if that's their China answer, that's not an adequate answer. I just want to, I want to put it in perspective. We're using, phrases like Skunk Works and, the moonshot, and on an individual company basis, maybe, okay. It's certainly a cultural difference, but this is not the China answer. This is an aperitif of the meal that everybody is going to have to eat in order to fight China.
And that's a great point, right? It's one product. It's going to be expanded. It is a platform. I think we've reported there's going to be about a half a dozen vehicles on this platform. But the real test, and Jim Farley said this on the earnings call the other week, he said the real gift of Skunk Works will be what it does for the rest of the company. So I asked Alan Clark when I was in California, can you do what you're doing here on F-150, on Bronco, on Mustang, on the existing core products for Ford? And part of the answer is yes, in terms of concepts, in terms of how they're changing the work. Now, obviously, it's not an EV platform. There's some things that won't translate. But yes, you can be more efficient in how you manufacture and build the products you've been building for 100 years. So once, whether or not they get this UEV platform right, it could still fail miserably. Who knows? But if they get it right, the real answer, the real trick for Ford will be incorporating it into the rest of the company and not just being a one-off side project for a few vehicles.
Here's the $1 million question for me. When this comes out, will people line up to buy it because of its price or because of its innovation, whatever? Or will they go, oh, that's pretty innovative, I'm going to wait a year. That one, let's make sure the wheels are going to stay on, That's going to be fun to watch.
Well, that's an interesting point, Larry, because if you remember, something that you could argue almost doomed their first wave of these new EVs, the Lightning and the Mach-E, is that it was just coming out of COVID, just coming out of the chip shortage, and there was way higher demand than what was really realistic and indicative of the market at large. So there were years, months-long waiting lists for the Lightning, for the Mach-E, for anything anybody was coming out with at that time. So I'm not sure Ford is really banking on years-long wait lists this time. They want a more realistic picture of what the market's going to be versus that inflated sort of sense of demand that ultimately, kind of doomed those projects because they geared up to build way more of them, and turns out they didn't need to.
Larry, now we've seen other automakers try to set up these separate operations, Tesla poaching, Silicon Valley culture clashing with Detroit. What makes you think this one might work or might not?
I honestly can't tell you whether it's going to work or not. Nobody knows when we do these secretive projects that are against, that go against the culture of an automaker. And they do it purposely, right? Because people get trapped in that culture, and they go by, because they have careers at that company, they go by the book that they have built at that company, and this is how we develop products, and this is what it has to have, and et cetera, et cetera. So there's some benefit to doing these one-offs, because you can break that habit. The fact that it's, that we're keeping it tight and focusing on one volume product, presumably a better, cheaper Maverick, an EV Maverick. It's an interesting thought, because, man, if there's a challenge right now anywhere in this industry, it's doing things cheap.
Now, Mike, what's the timeline here? When should we see some actual work being done in California?
Well, I got to see some of the work being done in California. I don't know when you guys will. So part of the tour was, there was a very scripted moment. I mentioned this to Jake on Tuesday, where they showed us a quick glimpse of a heavily camoed version of the truck, and it looked pretty Maverick size. Right, I saw it from 50, 100 yards away, whatever it was, so couldn't give you a great detail on it. But I think Ford is supposed to be taking the wraps off this thing near the end of this year. And then it's supposed to launch in 2027. So within the next year, we'll find out whether this was a success or a failure.
I love how this is like such a big secret that's like an open secret. So it's not really a secret, but it is a secret.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. That's funny. Coming up, we'll talk about Toyota's big loss despite record sales and the changing state of the pickup market. That's next on Weekend Drive.
Dealerships today face tighter margins, shifting consumer expectations, and affordability pressures tied to broader economic uncertainty. At the same time, consolidation and digital retailing are changing how products are sold and supported. That's why many dealers are re-examining how asset protection fits into long-term profitability and business goals. For more than 60 years, Protective Asset Protection has worked alongside dealerships across the country, delivering trusted F&I solutions like vehicle protection plans, maintenance programs, limited warranties, guaranteed asset protection, and more, helping dealerships generate revenue while helping customers protect what matters most. In addition to protection products, dealers have access to programs, tools, and proven training designed to support a wide range of business models. From digital retailing capabilities to dealer wealth building programs, Protective's approach is centered on partnership, giving dealers the flexibility to explore what fits their operation today and how it may support growth over time. If you're a dealer and interested in tapping new revenue streams through protection products, get in touch. Visit protectiveassetprotection.com/automotive news. That's protectiveassetprotection.com/automotive news.
Welcome back to Weekend Drive. I'm Kellen Walker, joined by Michael Martinez and Larry Velaquette. So Larry, last week on Weekend Drive, you predicted Toyota would post a loss despite record U.S. sales. And that's exactly what happened. Walk us through what you saw coming.
So, Kel, indeed, Toyota Motor North America, which operates Toyota's production and sales operations here, posted an operating loss of $1.21 billion for the fiscal year that ended March 31st, the Japanese fiscal year that ended March 31st. That's compared to a $681 million gain the year before, a $1.9 billion swing. Now, they had their fourth best year as an automaker ever in North America, and they still lost. They still swung to the bad $1.9 billion. Why? Tariffs, pure and simple. Tariffs put an $8.64 billion hit in Toyota Motor Corp's earnings. So much so that they've forecast an operating profit for the coming year, the one that we are now in, to tumble 20% across globally, where they will only make $18.79 billion
Only.
instead of the only instead of the $23.61 billion that they fell to this year. Yeah, I know. These are crazy numbers. They always are. But interestingly, we saw that, I've known this for a while, that they were struggling. They've said they were struggling. They talked about it at the turn of the calendar year, how they were going to have to increase pricing probably 3 times this year over the course of the year, just to try and mitigate some of these. And one thing that the new CEO talked about was they're going to look to their suppliers to help. That's a new look for Toyota, right? They have the best supplier relations in the industry and have for a very long time, because they work really closely with their supplier partners. It will be very interesting to see how this plays out, because if they go I don't think that they'll go in heavy-handed, but they are looking to their suppliers for help with with their losses. And the suppliers are not exactly rolling in money right now either because of tariffs. This is going to be really interesting. I will say one other thing. They forecast a $4.2 billion impact, U.S.-Iran war going forward. Now, that's interesting in that they think that they're going to lose 500 to 600,000, some of the 5 to 600,000 vehicles that are sold in the Middle East each year, which is about a quarter of what Toyota sells in the U.S. every year. What can happen, though, is because this could actually play out well for Toyota dealers, because Toyota's global production is pretty much maxed out. We could see some of those vehicles get moved here, and Toyota's got the tightest inventory in the industry. They'll take them.
Mike, what's your take on the Toyota situation and what it might signal for other automakers?
Yeah, my take is that maybe Akio Toyoda might want to put that Trump Vance t-shirt he was wearing in the back of his closet for a while. I don't think this one's that complicated, right? It's the lesson for if you're an import automaker is you're going to need to onshore more, because you look $8 billion ish in tariffs. That's a lot of money. That's the reason they swung to a loss, plain and simple. Plus, you have the Iran war now that's threatening them even further. So the lessons are build as much as you can in the States. You need to continue to offer diversified powertrains, which Toyota has done to their credit. They have a lot of investments in EVs in the works now, either unfortunately or fortunately for them. But you sort of have to stick to your guns at this point. You have to, Larry will probably have the numbers off the top of his head in terms of investments they've made in the United States in the past year. Those will bear fruit, but just in the near term, if you're a domestic automaker like a Ford or a GM, you're only talking $2 or $3 billion worth of tariff hit. So the impact's a little bit lower. But if you're one of the import brands, you really need to think about changing your market strategy in terms of where you build and where you sell. So it doesn't seem to me like this was really any of Toyota's fault, by and large, that this is just a consequence of the geopolitical actions that are happening around them and the changes to policy that they can't really affect. So again, in terms of lessons, I don't know that there is one, besides at this point, you have to hope to build as much here as you can here.
Yeah. And it's worth noting, Mike brings up a valid point. About more than 50% of the roughly 2.2 million vehicles that Toyota sells in the U.S. every year are built in the U.S. So a little over half, and 20% come from Japan, right? So now we're at 70, and the rest come from 2 places, Canada and Mexico. 2 of their biggest volume vehicles, RAV4 and the Tacoma, come from Canada and largely come from Canada and Mexico exclusively. So we're talking about large volume vehicles, and the stuff that comes from Japan, that's only got a 15% tariff. What's killing them is the tariffs that they're paying from the stuff, like the domestic automakers, the tariffs that they're paying on stuff from Canada and Mexico. that's just, it's wreaking havoc on their bottom line. Like every automaker that has, lived under the North American Free Trade Agreement or USMCA, whatever you want to call it. Everybody's going through this because of the severity and how quickly they were being asked to move stuff to the U.S. proper and getting whacked on stuff that had been in Canada and Mexico.
All right, guys. Well, before we wrap up, let's talk pickups. GM is pushing dealers to boost inventory on their lots, trying to capitalize on Ford's F-150 supply problems. Mike, remind us why Ford's in this situation in the first place.
Thanks to that September fire at Novellis's aluminum plant in New York, right? Novellis is Ford's main aluminum supplier for its trucks, for its big SUVs. And there was a pretty devastating fire. And then another follow-up fire a few months after that when they were trying to get the plant back open. And Ford's inventory has suffered. Remember, before they decided to kill the Lightning, they stopped the Lightning lines to focus on F-150 to prioritize their remaining supply onto the gas and hybrid models. And now Ford's trying to scramble to boost production by 50,000 units this year to offset what it's lost. And inventories are dwindling for dealers. I talked to one the other month. We reported on it. Said typically for truck month, he has 70. He was down to 9. So the upshot is Ford's expecting the Novellis plant to be back online by the end of this month. So they're hoping this is sort of the bottom of their inventory situation, and it's only going to go up from here. But you have the sharks circling in the water, and Chevy's ready to pounce.
Now, Larry, what kind of opportunity do you think this presents GM and other automakers? And will it last long enough to actually hurt Ford's market share in the segment?
There are a couple things going on here. Number one, I know we talked about this earlier, the Calvin test, right?
Yes.
Pickup truck loyalty is the strongest of any segment. Generally when somebody chooses what brand pickup they are going to drive, it's very difficult to get them to change. Automakers know that. So these conquest opportunities, they don't come up very often, because people are so locked in and they just, they're on a schedule, et cetera. There's a couple of things though that are special about pickups. Not least of which is a huge segment in the US, right? But we tend to think, I think most people tend to think of these as you got the lifestyle trucks, people that drive them that don't need them, and you got work trucks. There's a huge percentage of vehicles that are of pickups that are leased by companies, and they're put on lease schedules. And so if you don't have availability when your lease schedule is up, you may end up getting another brand pickup. So there's an opportunity there for the cross brands, for Ram and for Chevy and GMC to pick up some, and even Toyota. Although it's Toyota's and also ran in this segment. I do want to point out though, I've been doing the inventory story at Automotive News now for going on 12 years, I think. The monthly inventory story. Right now, Ford has the largest active inventory of any automaker, right? Has more vehicles. Now that's across, that's not just pickups, that's everything, right? There's over 406,000 vehicles that Ford dealers have on their lots that they're advertising for sale. But if you look at the segments, right, where segments are, full-size trucks, which normally have, automakers want about 100-day supply of full-size trucks. They have all these different configurations, based on bed size and how the seats are configured, and whether you get one row of seating or two, and how the doors are configured. So dealers have to stock a lot of them. They want a healthy inventory. But full-size pickups, not the heavy duties, just full-size pickup, the day supply right now, 63 days. That's under what mid-size SUVs, full-size SUVs. That's one of the tightest inventory levels that I have seen in the last decade for full-size trucks because of this Novelis fire. So yeah, there's opportunities for other automakers, but they got a long way to get to make that goal, and their best bet is on the commercial side.
Well, speaking of the commercial side, we saw Ram this week talking about going after more small business buyers. What's you guys' take on that competitive landscape? Anyone can jump in. Go crazy.
You know what? I'm gonna jump in here. I see Mike raising his hand, but I'm gonna jump in here. On the commercial side, we're gonna continue this conversation a little bit. On the commercial side, what's really important for pickup trucks are the outfitters, right? Every commercial company has an outfitter because they configure their truck the way that that they want. So they have all these truck specific beds that they put on, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's not easy for them to change. It takes a lot to get a company to switch. They have to have the upfitters. The upfitters have to have their configuration available. So it takes a long time. It's an opportunity, yes, but it's not an easy opportunity.
But with that being said, on the commercial side, you do tend to strip out a lot of the emotion of the loyalty on the retail side. My daddy drove a Ford, and his daddy before him drove a Ford, and I'm going to drive a Ford until I die, right? There's none of that.
Damn
It's about the dollars and cents. Does it pencil out? And if you can offer a compelling case, and if you can, we see all the automakers talk about bringing more of the upfitting work in-house or offering more out of the factory where you don't have to go to the third parties. So if there's an opportunity and you can put a lot of discounts on and you can give a business exactly what it wants for cheaper, they're probably more willing to make that move than a retail customer might.
Good point.
He's right.
Yeah. Good stuff. Mike, Larry, as always, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Cal.
That's all for this Weekend Drive edition of Daily Drive. I'm Kellen Walker. Thanks to Automotive News executive producer Jake Neer for his help on today's podcast. You can get the latest news on the pickup market, Ford's Skunk Works project, and everything happening in the auto industry at autonews.com. Come back on Monday for a conversation with Anders Bell, Chief Engineering and Technology Officer at Volvo Cars.
So from this perspective, the software-defined vehicle is like a massive reset. Like it changes completely how you approach the product from a product development organization.
We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show and the topics we covered today. Send us an email at dailydrive@autonews.com or leave us a voicemail at 313-444-2774. And if you enjoy the podcast, remember to leave a review and subscribe so you never miss an episode.